Hello and welcome to the In Publishing podcast. My name is James Evely and I'm the editor of In Publishing. Our guest this time is Loma-Ann Marks, editor-in-chief of Reclaim, an interiors magazine with the strapline Transforming the Traditional. Its 5 content pillars are eco, salvage, vintage, upcycled and creative. Loma tells us why the magazine has growing appeal.
It's a magazine that really hits a lot of interesting touch points for readers, and it will continue to, because people want character, they want story, they want a home with a personality, they don't want that identikit interior anymore, and they want to get stuck in it with it themselves increasingly. So yeah, Reclaim covers all of that.
Why Instagram has been such an important channel?
Instagram's been huge. I can't sort of understate that really. When I came on, there wasn't even an Instagram account. So I put that in place fairly quickly, and that has grown, and it continues to grow, and the engagement is really high.
And the benefits of magazine publishers taking a proactive approach to issues of diversity and inclusion.
It's opened up a whole new set of amazing homes, amazing businesses. It makes the magazine better. It makes the reader experience better.
And lots more besides. But first, a quick word about our valued sponsors. We would like to thank our podcast sponsor, Advantage CS, a leading global provider of subscription and membership management software. Capabilities include marketing, sales, payments, and customer relationship software for publishers, membership associations, and information providers. For more information, go to advantagecs.com. Loma-Ann Marks is editor-in-chief of Reclaim, a magazine that celebrates antique, vintage, upcycled and eco-interiors, property, products and lifestyle. At the British Society of Magazine Editors Awards in February, she was named Editor of the Year in the Homes and Interiors category. Loma, welcome to the In Publishing podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations on the award.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was lovely to win. Really nice.
Am I right in saying you were shortlisted a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I've entered twice. I was shortlisted the first time and won this time. So yeah, that was really nice.
What a thrill. Great. Now, the BSME judges described Reclaim as a brilliant and surprising magazine. The passion for the topic jumps off the pages and shines through. Why do you think they use the word surprising when talking about the magazine?
Honestly, I thought the exact same thing. I really wanted that when I saw it. I guess because traditionally, antiques, old things might have been seen as quite traditional, maybe a bit old-fashioned, and Reclaim as a magazine is the complete opposite of that. So possibly that's why they maybe thought it was more of a niche subject, which it kind of isn't anymore. It's much more mainstream.
So how do you achieve that? Obviously, you're talking about recycling and, in a way, old stuff. That's probably a very simplistic way of looking at it. But you're doing, shoot me down, but you're doing it in a modern way. So how do you pull that trick off?
Because I think it should be accessible, because I think antiques, vintage is things that I anyway love. And they're not inaccessible. I think they should be accessible to everybody. And they're full of character. They bring out people's creativity. So I think in that regard, I've always tried to reflect that in the magazine in terms of who we interview, whose homes we reflect, the stores and the fairs and the markets that we amplify. So, and also the design, which is crucial.
And your passion for the subject, which I can already hear, where does that come from?
I think because I'm quite a homebody, which has been quite lucky, I guess, in the past year.
Recently?
Yeah, exactly. But I always have been, and so I like pretty things to look at because I'm at home. I like to feel that I'm looking at lots of nice things, not necessarily expensive things, but things that reflect my character, photographs, books, paintings, plants, all that kind of thing I find really soothing. It makes me feel more comfortable. So yeah, it's something I've always had. I remember my when I was a student, my college in halls, my room was just plastered in pre-Raphaelite postcards and old
fantastic.
lace and old doilies. Yes, so, yeah. I've always had that kind of draw to the past.
I think that's much more creative than my university room. I shudder to think what we had on the walls. Now, on your website, you say that, quote, "We love the old and the time-worn, stories, history, character and provenance." Could you describe a room or a house that is a particularly good example of what Reclaim is all about?
I think Reclaim, it's evolved, I think, because nowadays, and well, we saw this when we first began, but it's become much more, as I say, mainstream now. But it's a lot of old things are given a new lease of life now with upcycling and repurposing. So the home that might have reflected Reclaim back in 2016 when we launched is slightly different to how it would be now. So, for example, I would have immediately said someone like Pearl Lowe's house or Sarah of London, who we featured before. That sort of faded grandeur, lots of vintage, lots of sort of peeling plaster, old wallpaper, this kind of vibe. Whereas now, that's still true. But for example, our current cover feature is architect Laura Jane Clark from Your Home Made Perfect. And
Okay.
and her home uses loads of vintage. She's so creative and so much into doing her own creative DIY and respecting the character of the house itself. But it's quite a different aesthetic. So yeah, it's evolved and it continues to evolve, I think.
And in terms of where Reclaim sits in the market, in fact, yeah, I mean, you launched 5 years ago. What did you think, or what was the gap in the market you identified? And who are you writing for? Who's your target audience?
Again, it's altered because at the time, so I came on board in 2016 in July. So I began as the deputy editor and then I moved to editor and then editor in chief. So I didn't launch the title in the January. So initially, I think it was much more aimed towards salvage, which it still has. We've got a salvage section that we're still very, and that's a real point of difference for Reclaim and other interiors titles. But it was much more niche and much more about only having these sort of salvaged pieces and sort of a kind of salvage hunters type vibe, which we, as I say, we still have, but that was much more what it was solely about. That has now very much amplified and increased to incorporate anything that's got a character that's eco. We've very much pushed on the eco side of things, and vintage and antiques obviously are eco by their very nature.
And I presume that the magazine's also benefited from the increased awareness of sustainability and the
Yes,
environment in
yeah,
recent years.
it has, and as I say, that's what it was always about. But it's really nice to see that that's becoming much more in demand now, and people are demanding things. Are eco demanding to know the provenance of the thing that they're buying and the supply chain and etc. So it's been really nice to catch that because we've already got the foundation in it and we've already got that ethos sort of as part of Reclaim's DNA.
Kind of the rest of the world catching up, maybe.
Right.
So in terms of the commercial model, what are your principal revenue streams for the magazine?
Well, the main thrust of the magazine is the print magazine. That's kind of the core, and so we have display advertising. I want to increase brand tie-ins and editorials. We do them right currently. We have some really successful ones. I'd like that to do more of that. Subscriptions are doing really well. They've increased hugely over the last year. So yes, there are other things that I would like to. I can't say too much right now, but there are more things that I'd like to do digitally that I'm very much looking at.
And in terms of subs and the divide between subs and newsstand, where do most people buy their copies? Is it via subscription or at the newsstand, which has obviously been a bit hit over the
Yeah, the
last 12
newsstand
months?
has been hit. It's still the newsstand. It's still the newsstand, but subs are fast catching up, and digital subscriptions are catching up too, as our international interest has really increased. Really increased. So that's another area that we're looking at, particularly in the US.
Okay, so the US is a particular focus for you, is it?
It certainly will be. There's a huge community of I don't want to say reclaimers, but I guess that's what you call them, people who are very much into this, into reclaiming, into vintage, into repurposing and reusing in a really beautiful, creative way. And we featured quite a number of US homes already. And yeah, there's certainly an opportunity there.
Well, it's a huge market.
Right.
Are there comparable titles over there, or is there a gap over there at the moment for a title like yours?
I think there's a gap.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
So what impact has COVID had on your readership, given that antique shops and the like have been closed for long periods of time?
So with those being closed, we've really supported that industry a lot in terms of amplifying and continuing to amplify them in the magazine. They've stayed open on Instagram, and we've very much seen that. So lots of the antiques fairs and markets that haven't been able to take place, they've done virtual fairs and virtual markets we did a whole feature right back at the start of the pandemic on Instagram antiques fairs. So really, lots of them have been really creative, really innovative in how they've dealt with the pandemic and not being able to open. We've just recently actually revamped our salvage section to really push the fact that most of these yards deliver now, and they are also on Instagram, and you can see a piece that you like, DM or email the dealer or the seller, and they will get back to you, post it off, deliver it, and you can continue enjoying sort of that side of things, even though you may not be able to go in person just yet.
So I sense there's a real sense of community with your audience, and obviously publishers and editors try and achieve that. How do you go about creating a sense of community with your readership?
It's sort of several-fold, really. I mean, Instagram's been huge. I can't sort of understate that, really. When I came on, there wasn't even an Instagram account, so I put that in place fairly quickly, and that has grown, and it's grown. It continues to grow, and the engagement is really high. So what we do is I try to make it really useful in terms of we reply to comments, or we will at least like the comments, which I know a lot of larger interiors magazines don't do. They'll be getting hundreds of comments under their post, and there's no interaction from them back. We have our newsletter. We sort of maintain really good relationships with the dealers and the paint companies. For example, I've just recently was one of the judges on the Fusion Paint Flip Runway refinishing awards. So little things like that keep those relationships going, and that keep relationships with the industry, but with the readers going. We do try very hard to always respond to readers quickly.
I think that's a very simple fact, isn't it? But obviously a lot of publishers don't, by the sound of things.
Not that I can see. I mean, maybe they do, but in the public domain, I haven't seen that as much. I mean, we've also got a hashtag #MyReclaim that I put in place a couple of years ago. No, less than that, 18 months ago now, perhaps, encouraging readers to post an image of their Reclaim magazine on Instagram with this hashtag #MyReclaim. And then the opportunity is that 3 or 4 of those images are then chosen and appear in the magazine the following issue or following a couple of issues away. So all these sort of little things that help people feel part of our story.
Okay. And in terms of replying to readers, and I can totally see how that increases engagement. Is that a big overhead in terms of time? I mean, do you do it yourself, or do you take it in turns amongst your team to reply to reader comments?
We take it in turn. I should say we're a tiny team. It's a very small team, and yeah. So we do. We've got I do, and our social media manager does as well. Prior to that, we did have someone else who would sort of dip in and out, but it's her and I mostly now.
Okay, so prior to Reclaim magazine, I think you launched your own venture called Culture Compass, a website dedicated to arts and culture. How did that experience go? What was that like?
oh gosh, this seems like back in the mists of time now. That was when I
happy memories. I don't know.
Honestly, it's a mixture, because it was something I was at Express newspapers. I went back after maternity leave, then stayed about a year, then left like completely. And I'd always wanted to do arts and culture and make arts and culture more accessible. At the time, gosh, I forget what year, but this must have been 2010, 2000, yeah, must have been around 2009, 2010. It always seemed quite remote to me. I mean, this goes back to when I discovered art when I was at uni. I loved it, but I'd never been exposed to it before. You know, I grew up on a council estate. I didn't know about going to art galleries, but when I did discover it, I loved it. And then I discovered theatre, you know, all the sort of classical arts, high and low arts, and I very much wanted to make my experience relevant and make it much more accessible to far more people who maybe weren't buying, you know, the Guardian or the Times a culture magazine on a Sunday. And at the time, blogging was kind of new, I guess. I didn't want it to just be my own voice, though. I was very, very aware of that. So yeah, I just launched it as me writing it, but other people writing it as well. And it went through a few redesigns. It was a huge learning curve, and I learned a lot about digital media and websites and design along the way.
So looking back at that, and I suppose with your experience at Reclaim, even if I don't think you were there, as you say, right from the start at Reclaim, but came soon after, but it had been recently launched, you know, for other publishers or other people considering launching a brand new title, you know, what would you say are the kind of key do's and don'ts of launching a new title?
I would say from my experience on Culture Compass, don't try and do everything. That was probably my biggest mistake, was trying to cover too much of arts and culture. I was doing literature and art and fashion. You know, I was shooting my own fashion shoots, which was, you know, a nice thing to do. And I still love those images, but it was just too much. I couldn't do it all. So I think if you're sort of an individual trying to launch something on your own, pare it right back down to what you can do well and what your expertise is, and be really, really good at that. In terms of a sort of a larger thing like Reclaim, I think it's more, finding the voice. It's just kind of the same thing, I suppose. It's being really clear about what you're saying and why you're saying it. And it does take, I think it's taken Reclaim certainly a little bit of time to find its groove and find, because, you know, antiques, vintage, you know, it is quite a broad subject, really. But I've managed to bring it down to 5 pillars. And when we did the redesign, I was very clear on what those 5 pillars are, and it remains those 5 pillars, and that's kind of a structure for everything else around it.
So was that the motivation behind your redesign? Because I think you redesigned the magazine soon after becoming editor. What was the thinking behind it? Why did you do it? What were you trying to achieve?
So I tinkered with the design before when I first became editor.
What does that mean? What did you do?
It means I sort of tinkered around the edges. So I redesigned a couple of the features, and I sort of brought in a little section. So I was tinkering around the edges, but actually the big redesign was in October 2018. So a couple of years after I'd been working on it. And the reason to do that was because I really wanted it to be much more friendly, have far more access points and more touch points for readers. As I say, because it's a wide subject, I wanted them to know where they were in the magazine. So we've got a very clear sort of news and shopping bit now at the front. We've got a cherish section, which I absolutely love, and that all the eco things are sit there. We've got display and design, which is, as it suggests, how to display and style and upcycle, which we've added an upcycling section to that as well. And things like the fonts, I wanted to change the fonts and make them far more fresh, far more modern. So I worked very closely with our designer on that.
And how did you go about that? So, you obviously had a view on the previous fonts. Did you just sit down and play around, or did you have particular fonts in mind? Were you inspired by other magazines, for instance?
Yeah, all of that really.
Okay.
He sent me. I sent him things that I liked. I said things that I didn't like. He had his own ideas as well, of course. He sent me mock-ups. We just worked with it on it together. It was a process. I really enjoy that side of it very much. I hope he does too. He might tell you something different, but yeah, I'm super happy with how it came out.
And I think one of the things you did was introduce, I think what you described as pioneering front covers.
Yeah,
What exactly is what is a pioneering
well,
front
for an
cover?
interior, so one in particular. So to celebrate the relaunch, interiors magazines don't tend to have people on the front. It's well, almost never. But for this, for the redesign sort of launch issue, I decided I wanted to have people to really sort of show readers what we're about and personify us a little better, perhaps. So taking those 5 pillars, which are antiques, vintage, eco, upcycling, and salvage, I essentially I've got my wish list of a person who would represent each of those 5 things. So we and I managed to persuade Jay Blades, who represents to me upcycling, Sonali Shah, who presents sort of Escape to the Country. She's the old stuff, the kind of the more traditional side of things. Joe Woods, whose home is absolutely gorgeous and vintage, and she's quite well known for loving vintage. Sarah Morell, who is she runs a very nice account and website called Reclaimed Woman, and James Gooch, who is a very young, very cool antiques dealer. And we did a lovely shoot with them, and I was really happy with the cover. That's still one of my favourite covers.
And in terms of when you sit down to design your cover each issue, I mean, obviously the cover is of great importance, especially at the newsstand, to try and achieve standout. What are your do's and don'ts of front cover design?
Well, for me, I like a lot to be going on, and I like to see quite a large bit of the room. So that's for me. That's worked for me on a personal aesthetic choice, but it has worked on the newsstand too. So there's plenty to look at. You feel like you can walk into that room. I'm not a huge fan of sort of deep going in too close and seeing details, but that's some magazines do that and it can look really pretty, but for me I prefer to pull back further. I like to see a window, or if not a window, then a look through into another room. Obviously the cover lines are really important, and I've worked, that's been a real learning curve for me too, honestly, with getting a right balance of. They've very much changed over the last year on cover lines, and I think other magazines I've noticed have changed too.
In what sense?
So before the pandemic, perhaps your front cover line, your main cover line might have been design heroes or something really quite aspirational and 25 ways to make your kitchen amazing or whatever. Something that was not maybe a little remote, whereas now I think they're much more personal. They're much more, they feel much more conversational and much more speaking to the reader on an equal footing, which I think is really nice to see.
And what do you think has prompted that? Is that an effect of the pandemic, or is that just the way you saw the market or the front cover design going anyway?
Probably something of both. I think that traditionally, I want to say that interiors magazines have tended to be very middle class, very white. I was very aware of that, and I'm very aware of not doing that. But I think other titles have also become more aware of that, and that's part of the reason why they're now much more not sort of wagging their finger at you telling you mustn't do this and those are the rules of interiors and how dare you break them, but much more about inspiration and guidance and being more friendly, perhaps.
Because I mean, that has been one of the themes of last year. Obviously, the sustainability in the environment is one, but also inclusivity as well. Is that something which you're very aware of when editing the magazine?
Yes, absolutely, yes. I mean, I'm mixed race myself, so I've always been aware of it. And any time a home or a business or a company with a black owner came, I'd be like, yeah, and I'll put that in the magazine. But after Black Lives Matter happened, I realised that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to wait for things to come to me. I have to seek it out. I have to make a concerted effort to find Black-owned businesses, Black homes, all of this. And that has been, it was a bit of a wake-up call to me, actually. And I'm very glad that I did, because so much, it's opened up a whole new thing, that a whole new set of amazing homes, amazing businesses. It makes the magazine better. It makes the reader experience better. So something I was
And if you had positive feedback as a result?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, and it's something that had to happen. I think it certainly had to happen in interiors magazines, and I'm pleased that I've been able to amplify more of these businesses and more of these homes and more of these products.
Excellent. Now, photo shoots is something from some of the things you get closely involved in. Is there a secret to getting a good photo shoot, or is it you leave it to the photographer and let them get on with it?
It's probably the latter. If you've engaged,
Oh, really? Okay.
No, honestly,
Yeah.
if you've engaged, to a large extent, it depends. If you're shooting people or if you're shooting an interior, there's obviously slightly different things you need for each one. But generally speaking, if you trust a photographer enough to engage them, then you should trust them to do their job. So I think once you've spoken with them, obviously they know what you need, and you're clear about what you need. Then let them do it. Let them get on with it and stand back. I mean, I think because so often with anything creative, things happen. The sort of serendipity happens, and things that you wouldn't have planned, you've got to allow those to take place, and you can't sort of be keep stepping in, micromanaging everything, because certainly if you've got people in the shoot, it just puts them on edge. It puts the photographer on edge. If it's interiors, you need to allow them to get into their flow and their rhythm and see that use the light and just trust them.
So I suppose the key thing is obviously having a very clear idea in your own mind what you want, briefing them properly, and hiring the right people.
Yes, exactly that. I mean, obviously, if it starts going pear-shaped, you've got to do something.
Step in.
Yeah, right. But
have there been any memorable experiences, good and bad, of photo shoots which have gone well or badly, and any lessons learned?
Well, the shoot, I have to say, the shoot I did for the cover that I was telling you about earlier, that was amazing. That was for having 5 people, 5, experts and some celebrities in their own right. They go on beautifully with each other. The sort of hair and makeup worked well. The location was lovely. We had that was a really enjoyable day, and I was interviewing every one of them that day as well. So it was quite tiring, but it was a really nice shoot. That was really nice. In terms of not so great ones, the one that springs to mind,
you don't need to know.
No, it's fine. I don't mind saying.
No,
there's no, because it doesn't involve any people, so it's fine. No, it was the Christmas gift guide when I was on the Saturday magazine at the Express. Oh my gosh, because I had to call. It was just it. Yeah, I had to call in so many gifts and style them and get them shot in a very, very fast turnaround. Gosh, that was stressful, but it turned out fine. It turned out fine.
Your desk was surrounded, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's an understatement. But yes, it was fine. The pictures were fine in the end. That's all that matters, I guess.
The end result counts, doesn't it?
Right.
Now, in your time as editor, you've obviously redesigned the magazine to great effect by the sound of things, but I think you also had You've also redesigned the newsletter as well. So what was your aim with that, and what is the role of the newsletter in your publishing strategy?
Well, we're actually about to do another redesign of the newsletter, so it's not exactly as I want it to be just yet, but it's much better than it was. So initially, the newsletter was to amplify or to talk about the new issue. So essentially, that's what it was sort of a signpost to say, "Hey, the new issue's out." But now that's not good enough. It needs to be much more than that, and it's now much more about being useful, because I'm so aware that people get hundreds of emails. I don't want to clog up their inbox with something else that's not useful or interesting. So now, it's much more about pulling content together that links then through to the website, that's got some interesting content, that's useful content about artists, or how to add vintage to your home office, or whatever it is. So that's much more what it's about now. And also finding our competition, which is people, readers like, and going forward, I think I'd more sort of brand tie-ins and that kind of focus.
So it's gone from being something to promote the next issue to something with almost a publishing strategy of its own, a life of its own.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as I said before, we're a tiny team, so when we when we want to do something new, essentially it's me that will do it, and obviously with support from other team members. So yes, we can't just go ahead and do a sort of 3 times a week newsletter. That takes up too much resource. So we need what we do to make that impactful and really useful.
But I suppose one of the advantages of being a small team is if you do decide to do something, you get on and do it, and you don't have to get it passed by numerous other sign-offs and committees.
There is that. Yes, that is true. That is the plus point.
So with social media, you mentioned Instagram already, and it sounds like that's a prime channel for you. Is that the main one for you, or do you use Facebook and Twitter equally?
Instagram is definitely the prime channel. We do use Facebook. We do use Twitter as well, although Twitter, I think you have to do something different for each one, actually. Instagram suits this type of business. It's a creative business. That's image led and very aesthetic. So that's why I think it does so well on Instagram. Facebook is, we use it, and we talk a lot about our offers and our subscriber offers and any sort of special deals that we have or what have you on Facebook. And it does Facebook's quite a good platform for that kind of thing. Twitter is a sort of an entity in itself. I think it's a bit of a mixed bag, really. But we're on there, but we don't use it. We may use it more, but it's a very different beast, I think.
So Instagram and is the main route by the sound of things. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So where next for Reclaim magazine? What's in the pipeline? What's coming up?
So again, I can't tell you everything, but I want to do.
Okay.
But no, I want
Fair
to.
enough.
No, but I want there is more coming up. I've got some plans to keeping the print magazine as sort of the core product, and everything sort of bouncing from sort of out from that, but much more digital content and more digital content that will be, and media rich content as well, which I'm looking at a lot more now.
And are you excited about the future?
Yes. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, Reclaim is I've always thought it's a magazine that really hits a lot of interesting touch points for readers, and it will continue to, because people want character, they want story, they want a home with a personality. They don't want that identikit interior anymore, and they want to get stuck in it with it themselves increasingly. So yeah, Reclaim covers all of that.
We talked about digital, and obviously digital forms an important part of your plans going forward, but it sounds like print is still the flagship channel for you. When you look at the wider consumer magazine sector, how do you see the future of print magazines? Now, everyone's, digital has been just on the forefront, the forefront of everything in the last year since COVID struck. Although obviously people were going digital way before then. How important is print, do you think?
I think it definitely still is, and it especially so after the pandemic, because people want to get away from their screens if they can. We're on our screens continually, so it's really nice to have something different. And I mean, I read all my newspapers online, so I'm not saying there's not it's vitally important to have your publication online and as well. But magazines, particularly interiors, fashion as well, they're still it's tactile. They're still seen as an affordable treat and something that you can have ownership over. There's a print magazine inspires loyalty, I think, much more, especially in a new brand like Reclaim. So there's, readers send me photos of, they've got, a vintage suitcase full of every single Reclaim that they've bought since the beginning. It's really lovely to see it. So I think print certainly for aesthetically led subjects is here to stay.
Excellent. Well, I'm pleased to hear that. And finally, a question we ask all our guests on the podcast: outside of work, what do you do to relax?
Well, I'm laughing.
If you get any time.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking, when do I have time to relax? I've got 2 children, so homeschooling has been part of my free time. But no, I'm joking. I love reading. I can't wait for all the galleries to reopen and go to see art. I like shopping. I like walking. I live quite close to the River Thames, so I absolutely love going down there and just clearing my head and getting a coffee from the nice coffee lady down near the river. Yeah, and I can't wait to go on holiday. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, that sounds very busy. Homeschooling, I take my hat off to you, because that's, that must have been particularly challenging. I mean, how old are your kids?
Well, to be fair, they are pretty self-sufficient. I shouldn't overplay my too much with it. So my big one is 16 and my little one is 11. So the little one I've helped more sort of practically in terms of subjects. My older girl, she's very self-sufficient. They're both very good, honestly, and very get on with it. But yeah, in terms of just keeping them happy, I think keeping
Good
everyone
for them.
sane.
Good for you. Good for them. Yes. And one other question, because obviously you're into performing arts of all descriptions. What do you think the opening night of theatre and festival and concert halls is going to be like? You got the first performance back. Do you think that'll be quite an emotional experience?
Yeah, I think it will. I think that sense of being with other people and not having to be frightened of them, that sense of all getting together to enjoy something just for the sake of enjoying it, it will be so beautiful. It will be lovely. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Can't wait. Loma-Ann Marks, thank you very much for being our guest on the In Publishing podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
We would like to thank Advantage CS again for sponsoring this podcast. Advantage CS has been developing subscription management solutions for the information industry since 1979. The comprehensive functionality, adaptability, and scalability of its software helps leading publishers around the world manage their businesses more effectively. Find out more at advantagecs.com. Thank you to Loma for being our guest this time. The BSME judges were correct. The passion does shine through. One takeaway for me from our chat was how best to manage talent. Hire experts, brief them properly, and then just let them get on with it. Don't micromanage. Find out more about Reclaim at reclaimmagazine.uk or check out their successful Instagram page, comments and all. Their handle is reclaimmag. Loma was our 30th guest on the podcast. If you'd like to listen to any of the previous 29, then you can find them all at inpublishing.co.uk/podcasts. Thank you for listening, and do join me in 2 weeks' time for another podcast where my guest will be Emma Callahan, Sales and Invention Director at Reach Solutions. Bye for now.